Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar. I'm very, very excited to introduce you to the first of our webinar series ahead of our HealthSpan show running in May. So today's discussion is looking at what do we mean by the biology of aging and how is it being applied to the beauty sector. We've got a really fabulous panel of panelists to talk you through this, some amazing diverse experience, and really, really excited to have them with us today. So I'm going to ask each person to introduce themselves just to get us going. I'm also going to ask each of our panelists to give us some inspiration or a memory about what it was that first sparked their interest in this field, this intersection between the biology of aging and the beauty field. So before we get going, I'll quickly introduce myself. My name's Angela Tyrrell. I'm a Senior Vice President with LSX, and we are the producers of the HealthSpan show. We also do a lot of work in longevity, so we're so excited to be bringing these two topics together. And for me, the thing that really, really sparked my interest in this space, to be honest, was just realizing that this entire space of longevity biotech existed. I was absolutely fascinated about the implications that it has for preventative health, and of course for the wider world, whether that's FMCG, whether that's biotech, whether that's healthcare. So with that, I'm going to ask our panelists to please introduce themselves. Stephanie, I'm going to start with you.
Hi, so thank you so much for including me in this panel discussion. Very much looking forward to it. So I'm Stephanie Manson-Brown. I'm the VP and Head of Clinical Development for Allergan Aesthetics, which is an AbbVie company. My background is plastic surgery, so I've always had a very much a vested interest in the aesthetics and cosmetic world, as well as plastic surgery and tissue regeneration in general. And really what sparked my interest was going to a lot of the aesthetic conferences and seeing that there was not quite the level of basic science that I think would be, of interest to a lot of aesthetic doctors. And I think, injection techniques very important, but there was just that lacking and really fully translating some of the really interesting early discoveries and early science across to the clinical setting. So that really was the impetus behind me getting involved in it and also setting up the Science of Aging, which is a platform that we've set up from an Allergan Aesthetics R&D perspective. So I'm the founder of that platform that really does bring discoveries from different parts of longevity and aging research into the aesthetic medicine field.
And a really wonderful platform. I would encourage anybody who's watching this webinar to go and have a look if you're looking for more information about this space. Sybil, I'd like to hand over to you, please.
So hello, everyone. I'm very pleased to be here, to be included into this panel. And I'm working at L'Oreal, so the research and innovation part of the group. And L'Oreal is not just L'Oreal Paris, but we have many different brands. I think most people probably really know that. I'm working in the advanced research part of the research and innovation, and I'm initiating collaborations with outside partners, and I did many of them in the aging field. I'm not a skin aging person by training, I have to say. I came more or less to the cosmetic field. It was a little bit, well, by chance, but I've always been interested in aging, and I worked in basic research for many years, and there I was working on proteolysis, autophagy, ubiquitin proteasome system. I was working on metabolic diseases, AMPK, PGC1, and also in C. elegans on programmed cell death. So I have a long-standing interest in the basic research around aging and longevity.
Wonderful, thank you. And Carolina.
Yes, pleasure to be here on this panel today. Thank you so much for the invite. I'm the co-founder and CEO of OneSkin. My background is in stem cell biology and tissue engineering. And at OneSkin, we are basically combining the science of aging with skin biology in order to develop products that target the root cause of skin aging, more specifically the accumulation of senescent cells, aged cells that build up in our tissues and start secreting inflammation. We can dive into the details later. But what made me very interested in the field, when we started OneSkin, we were looking to develop a system to validate if these anti-aging products, how they work, if they work. And then we started studying a lot about aging, measuring biological aging. When I saw companies that were targeting aging as their main value proposition, this was something like a game changing for me, because I realized that aging is the main cause of most of the diseases that we are trying to treat. And we share these mechanisms in different tissues aging. So it was very interesting to see that what other companies were targeting to treat Alzheimer's could also be interesting to target skin aging and to target osteoarthritis. And these can help us, to extend our health span. So this made so much sense for me and got us super excited to bring these two words together and apply to skincare, skin health, and that's what we are working today.
Well, we're very glad that you're here, and we'll be coming back to flesh this out in a bit more detail. Finally, Bernie.
Yeah, hello. I'm Bernie. I'm biochemist by training, so I'm a bit with Sibyl. I'm not naturally a pure aging person. I first got fascinated by the microbiome, and it actually roots back in history when I was a kid with many pimples and reading way too many science fiction books. I was always fascinated by these ideas that they're little robots, and they could fix us like little machines and stuff like this. And then as I finished my studies, and one day it struck me that actually that already exists. These little robots exist. They exist on us and in us. And it's basically the bacteria that live with us. They're in a symbiosis with us. And then a bacterial cell is nothing like a little pharma plant or a little robot. It's a bit more abstract. It's not designed by man. It's designed by nature. But in the end, it makes the same purpose. So that brought me to the skin microbiome, and we started working on that back in 2014. And our first asset is in acne vulgaris, so the pimples. We connect that back to my teenager years, maybe, although that wasn't the driving factor. And there, our first product will reach the market by the end of the year. And we're having very encouraging clinical results. But the reason why I'm here is aging. And what made us choose this as the next asset was two main events. It was both scientific papers, so very boring. I changed from reading sci-fi books to that, but it sounded like sci-fi what I read that day. The first one was a study in the gut microbiome in killifish. So these very specific little fish, they are short-lived normally, that's why they're perfect in studying aging. And the group in the Max Planck Institute could show that when they transplanted into old killifish, the gut microbiome of young killifish, they could extend their lifespan. And it was fascinating. I first thought, this must be a complete artifact or something. And I looked at the details, and it was a very robust study. It was very fascinating. And then the second thing that even motivated me more was studies. There's actually now a few of them out there where they try to use microbiome signatures. So they analyze the microbiome, then use artificial learning to predict the chronological age of a person. I mean, we all know how difficult it is at a party and you're supposed to guess the age of a person. If you could sample the microbiome and really quickly analyze it, you would actually have a very good chance of doing that. And more interesting was that while the gut microbiome is a very good predictor, the best predictor is the skin microbiome. So we thought if it has such a fundamental role, then clearly our key working horse is the modulation of the microbiome. This must have a strong impact in aging. And there's many good scientific reasons why it is. So that's how we got totally excited and started unraveling the little connections.
Well, brilliant. You're making me feel excited to get into this discussion. So I would like to remind everyone who's watching to please use the Q&A function if you'd like to put any questions to our panelists. Please feel free to also use the chat to connect with one another. There's plenty of you watching, and if you're wanting to get in touch with each other, that's the best way to do it. But if you do have specific questions for our panel, please use the Q&A function, and we'll get to those throughout the discussion. So I think to get started, we're going to take a bit of a back step and look at the way that we talk about aging within the beauty sector and look at how that is evolving. Stephanie, I know you've got some particular thoughts on the use of the term beauty, and I'd love to start with you about this question. How is the way that we consider aging and beauty changing?
Yeah, so it's a great question and a really important opening question just to set the context. So as I've spoken to you before, Angela, I do struggle with the term beauty at times. I think sometimes we need to question what do we actually mean by beauty, and I think certainly it's something that, you know, with the moving dynamics and as we're moving on to look at diversity and inclusion, we really need to you know, stop and think, what do we mean by beauty? And I think it's more of a way of being able to express yourself the way that you want to express yourself. So it's about moving away from the concept of normative beauty and also the ingrained beauty standards that we're applying today. So it's about looking at race, ethnicity, and age. And age is really important because the term anti-aging has been very much applied in our industry. And I think it's such a negative connotation. It's something that actually does potentially add into this perpetuation of age discrimination. So it's really about, you know, breaking down those rigid boundaries and being more inclusive, and also, you know, reflecting the differences as they relate to race, ethnicity, gender as well, and age. So I think people are moving towards being interested in looking good rather than looking younger. And it's about a mindset, a change in mindset. So there's growing evidence to demonstrate that looking good can have significant positive impact on psychological and social wellness. And there's, you know, lots of data being generated and really being able to demonstrate that actually, if you look at aging with a negative perspective, and that this actually will have an impact into your longevity. So there's increasing evidence to support the importance of psychological well-being as part of human functioning, also the protective role of psychological well-being and health in lowering the risk of disease and disability and increasing longevity. What does that all mean from the beauty perspective? I think it's really important just to, you know, move, I think, into the understanding of the appearance and how important the appearance is for people, and how it can impact people's quality of life. So really, I think that this is where, as an industry, you know, that there's definitely a need for us to evolve our way that we communicate around aging, and also how we communicate about beauty, and really reframe it in the context of supporting people and giving people the options really to be able to you know, support the psychological well-being, and give them the options to you know, bring in interventions as it relates to enhancing, or I would actually even say maintaining their appearance, and also looking at maintaining their health as it relates to skin biology. So yeah, that's really kind of where my thought process is with regards to the evolving nature of beauty and age in that concept.
It's a really wonderful answer, and really, I love this concept of centering around health. Perhaps Carolina, could you add to that?
Yes, for sure. So I agree with Stephanie, and I always had some problems with anti-aging, mainly because we all know that the industry is flooded with, you know, false promises and unbacked claims. And the more that we study about aging, we want to be able to provide healthy aging, right? And mainly at OneSkin, we are not focusing on providing the perfect and flawless skin, but how we can improve the health of your skin, the function of your skin. Our skin has such an important role for our health. It's our main, you know, physical barrier, protects our body. So the function is what is related to, you know, to our health. That's what we focus on. But and also another point, and I agree with what Stephanie said in terms of, you know, embracing aging and loving, you know, how you look, if you feel comfortable with that look. So personally, for example, I like to feel comfortable with my skin without makeup. So I want to feel that my skin is healthy, that if I don't have makeup, I still feel good, and I still, you know, feel confident. And I think by providing products that promoted the health of your skin, you are allowing people to be empowered, to be confident, you know, with their own skin, without needing, I would say, super aggressive or very a lot of layers that will cover who you really are.
Wonderful answer. Bernie, can you perhaps give some insight from a microbiome perspective and onto this concept?
Yes, I mean, classical, a lot of, not necessarily anti-aging, but a lot of skincare products. I mean, in the best case, they were just full of preservatives in order to make it easier to produce the product. But like we start realizing that we maybe do some damage with that. Like, I mean, it's now all preservative free. Some products were also like we had a lot of really aggressive against the bacteria on your skin product. Again, as a general in the cosmetic sector, not only anti-aging, but also there. And we start realizing that this is not good anymore, that we need to move away from this. It is all a lot more about moving from anti-aging to healthy aging. I think there is nothing wrong, as everyone already said, there's nothing wrong with aging. We will age. It's a biological concept. It is just like, how do we want to do this? And how are we tackling this? And instead of fighting a fight which we are bound to be lose, because the only thing in life that is certain is we will age and we will die. That's the only thing we know when we are born. And everything else is open.
I know there's some of the science community who are trying to dispute that idea, though, Bernie.
They can only delay. They will not win.
And Sybil, I'll come to you, because I know that you don't sit in the marketing, which is obviously at the center of this this question, and that in itself in L'Oreal is a huge component. But can you give any insight?
A very important one, though.
yeah, exactly. Can you give any insight on I suppose within a scientific function at L'Oreal, how you guys are thinking about this concept of rejuvenation versus anti-age, sort of classical anti-aging?
Well, I think, there is, of course, a change of mindset in general, also in cosmetic industry. And I mean, what we see in the recent years, I think I remember one of the advertisement. It was with Jane Fonda and Helen Mirren, and they said, so age is a non-issue. And so I think that's now more the mindset. Again, I could not agree more with what you all said. It's more about looking good in your skin. I mean that, or feel good in your skin, than about eternal youth. I mean, eternal youth doesn't exist, maybe in Greek mythology, but in reality, it doesn't exist. So of course we age, we have to face it. And we cannot look young forever, but we can, also cosmetic can help to maintain skin in a good health. And I mean, healthy skin is so important for aging. And so I think that's the main thing now, that we want to maintain skin in a good health. Skin has so many different functions. I mean, it protects us. It has an immune function. It produces vitamin D. I mean, skin is so important. And while there is also some evidence that if the skin barrier is impaired, that you have more systemic inflammation. And I mean, we all know if you have a tiny cut, there's blood, right? I mean, there's directly in the superficial dermis, you have vascularization, and it's I mean, it's not surprising that there is an impact of an impaired skin barrier on your systemic inflammation. And so, yeah, skin is so important, and we should keep it healthy. And of course, also, I mean, people want to, it's a well-being question as well. People want to feel good, and when they look in the mirror, and they don't want to look tired. They want to, I mean, if somebody is energetic and healthy, they also want to look energetic and healthy. And so I think that's the main function also of cosmetic. I mean, you all said it, right? We cannot do miracles, for sure, and but that's a very important point, that we keep the skin in a good function and healthy.
Yeah, let's get into the I'll just ask someone to turn their microphone off. Thank you. Let's get into the details then of this concept of the biology of aging and what we really mean when we're talking about that and how it applies to skincare. So Carolina, I'm going to put you in the hot seat. I'm going to ask you to explain the biology of aging as though you were doing it to someone who'd never heard of this field before. Can you really put it into basic terms what we mean when we're talking about this concept?
Sure. So I think this was a field that evolved a lot in the past few years. And in 2013 came out this paper where basically we defined 9 hallmarks of aging. So scientists were describing what were the main mechanisms that were underlying the aging process. And so there are some, for example, stem cell exhaustion and genomic instability. And what we saw that those mechanisms, they happen in different tissues, and some more pronounced than others. And there is one very important mechanism that we are focusing right now, that's the accumulation of senescent cells, that are basically cells that accumulate a lot of damage and they stop replicating, but they start secreting inflammatory signals that end up leading to tissue dysfunction. In the case of the skin, collagen breakdown, wrinkles, sagging, and so on. So what we learned as a community in the longevity field is that when we intervene with one of those mechanisms, we can usually make a more significant impact in the tissue health than if we treat only the symptoms. Like the healthcare system today is focused on treating the symptoms, right? Painkillers and so on. So when we understand the cause and we target the root cause, one of those specific mechanisms, or ideally different combinations that target different mechanisms, then we have a more significant effect in managing the biological age. That means keeping your tissue functioning and healthy with less damage. So we always want to prevent the accumulation of damage, so we have our cells and tissues working properly. In the case of OneSkin, basically we have found a peptide that targets senescent cells and prevent the accumulation of senescent cells in our tissues. So we see that improved skin health markers in our models in the lab.
Wonderful, thank you. Sybil, would you add anything to Carolina's very comprehensive definition there?
Well, I just would like to add something. Okay, if we talk, basically there is a period in life that is called youth, and all the mechanisms that protect and repair and replace, they work perfectly. Or they're highly efficient, let's put it like that. And then over time with aging, it seems that these processes are less efficient. And so that leads to cellular damage and then tissue damage. And so to keep now all these pathways that are implicated in that, protect, repair, and replace, to keep them fully functioning, that would mean that you can extend what we defined youth span, or you keep them at least functioning enough that you can delay the aging process. And so, I mean, many things that people learn in the aging field, and I mean, I'm completely fascinated about that because I come from energy metabolism, is that basically the interventions that seem to work, at least in model organisms, that keep or that delay the aging process, they all interfere somehow with the energy metabolism. I mean, you have the caloric restriction. I mean, that's not something we aspire for, I guess. I don't think it would be good for your skin, by the way. But for example, periodic fasting, and then mimicking these processes, these biorapamycin or metformin, and so they're all interfering. I think they're changing hundreds of genes, of course, if you touch these pathways, but they're all interfering with energy metabolism. And these were probably things that when we were like humans, not living in civilization, and we had to undergo through famine, and that basically that kept humans alive, right? And so so I think that is for me particularly fascinating, that you can touch on these pathways and then you stimulate your body, your tissue defense, and you can maintain the tissue healthy.
And then, of course, microbiome, we are talking about a whole range of new organisms. Perhaps, Bernie, can you feed in there as well?
Yeah, we're talking about new organisms, but the concepts stay the same. I mean, I can only second what Carolina explained before, that you try to influence the cells, and the difference, what we do when we look at the microbiome, you have more cells, more bacterial cells in and on your body than you have human cells. So they have an impact. They constantly produce metabolites that will one way or another influence us, and they change genetic programs. We already know that. And so the key is choose or select the right ones that will actually have this desired effect, that will produce the small molecule that you want to have. For example, like with Cutibacterium acnes, the most abundant produced protein by this and secreted. It's the most abundant secreted protein by the most abundant bacterial species on your skin is an antioxidant. I mean, that is in every anti-aging cream. The connection is obvious, and that is just the tip of the iceberg. Because, like, I mean, it produces thousands and so many other small molecules. And I also need to second Sibyl. The energy metabolism is a key factor. She laid it wonderfully out. I have nothing to add to that, except that, like, also the bacteria, they're connected to that, because everything that is produced and also many things that the bacteria produce are taken up again and feed into this energy metabolism. So it is just, the concepts are the same. The only thing, we extended one step further and then try to modulate that part and through this come back onto the human skin. Yeah. And in the end, we're all doing the same, I think.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, let's look at the actual application. And Stephanie, I'll pass to you if that's okay, to take us through the next step of, well, we understand what the biology of aging is. How do we start to then apply this to I'm going to keep saying beauty, but to personal care and aesthetics?
Yeah, so I mean, again, I think it's listening to all the other panelists, there's been really important points that have been made. I mean, I think we always need to remember that the skin really is the most perceptible organ to show the initial signs of aging, and these include developing wrinkles, sagging skin, loss of elasticity, and loss of smoothness, and skin pigmentation, which are often the drivers for people to seek aesthetic or cosmetic treatment. And you know, it's the most, we talk about it being the largest organ of our body. It's also the outermost protective layer of the body, and so therefore it's exposed to both the intrinsic factors, for example, the genetic, metabolic, and endocrine factors, and also extrinsic factors, UV radiation being one of the key ones, environmental pollution, and smoking. So these are all stimuli that do drive the aging process. And I think, you know, the paper and the Hallmarks of Aging that Carolina was referring to, that really was a landmark paper, and the concepts had been discussed, you know, before, but it was a really interesting paper that really set out a framework for us to actually be studying and moving the advancing research in this area by tying it to these principles. And I think, you know, previously, and certainly when I look at it from being a medical doctor and subsequently a surgeon, we used to learn about the processes of individual chronic disease and actually think that it was unique processes relating to those conditions. Whereas now, what's very clear is that there's, you know, the basic mechanisms that Carolina and others have explained today, and that really do speak to the mechanisms of failure, as Sibyl said, the failure of different cellular functions. And so they all interplay. And so, you know, where we would have thought previously that dementia was not related to, you know, the signs of aging from an external point of view, we're now understanding that there are links, and it's about understanding the complexity and the interplay of these different processes. And I think, you know, and again, to echo some of the comments and what Carolina said, you know, one of the most exciting elements really as well is that, you know, now we have got the possibility of going to the root cause of aging. And I think, you know, instead of treating the consequences, and I think that that's something that becomes even more important as we're looking at the outer aspects in aesthetics, because often when you've got the signs and symptoms, that's when they really have taken hold, and it actually starts to become more difficult to treat them. And you're almost just, you know, filling the gap, so to speak, or replenishing or attempting to replenish what you have. So therefore, if you've got the options to start addressing the process at an earlier stage, then that's something that will help with the maintenance element. And absolutely agree with what's been discussed today about the skin health aspect, which will be incredibly important.
And you have a very rich community of biotechs and academics as well working in this space through the science of aging. Can you give some insight about how you see potential convergence between those two spaces, starting to bring traditional biotech into actually work in aesthetics as well?
Yeah, so absolutely. So that's something that we really wanted to focus on with the science of aging. And Carolina's colleague, Alessandra, actually came on and presented at the event last year and presented the incredible work that OneSkin have been doing. So I think actually, and kind of taking a step back and look at some of the traditional approaches with the biotech companies, there's been, as we know, there's been an explosion in the research looking into longevity and aging science. And actually it's about translating that and now seeing if there are any opportunities or potentials to apply it to aesthetics. And then, to give an example, we had Ocean Biotherapeutics who are really targeting, they've got the targeted senolytic gene therapy, and they're actually investigating chronic kidney disease. And John Lewis is the Chief Scientific Officer. Again, he presented at our event last year, and they're actually looking at some of the parameters that would portray and be able to demonstrate some impact from a skin health point of view, as well as just the general quality of life measures as it relates to general health. And that's where, there is that concept where previously, I think the targets and the focus has been on more the age-related chronic disease, and it's actually been looked at how can we translate that, how can we actually look at how that could be potentially applied to the aesthetics arena. And I think there's a lot of very interesting work there. I mean, certainly from our perspective with Allergan Aesthetics and AbbVie, we're working and partnering with a lot of companies who have had their previous focus in other areas, but then seeing how we can interact, partner, and start to look at some of the modeling that we've got to be able to provide that insight into the benefits and potential efficacy as it relates to skin biology and tissue biology.
And of course, one of the big challenges for biotechs who are working in this space is measuring aging. And potentially the skin could provide a tool for us to use as a biomarker. Carolina, is that something you're comfortable commenting on?
Yeah, that's something that we are definitely looking into, but we don't have yet, I would say, a non-invasive way to measure skin biological age. The way that we measure today, we still needed to get a skin biopsy. So it's invasive. Not everyone wants to be punched, but it's the most accurate way that we have up to today. I'm happy to talk to Benny later to see how we can maybe use the skin microbiome, and if there is a clock that today we use to measure different markers. In our case, we are analyzing mainly the epigenetic markers. So we have a clock to measure skin biological age. Some companies are working on measuring your biological age through images. But I think we are making a lot of advances, but we are not there yet in terms of accuracy. But definitely, if we can get something that's non-invasive, skin would be the perfect organ to be assessed to predict your biological age.
Yes, or potentially the microbiome on the skin. Have I got that right, Bernie?
The microbiome is, at least when you use the right sequencing technique, an excellent predictor for chronological age. So this is not our research. It's published by the Knight Lab and others. And it also then helps us to understand the biological age. It has to be seen. But you have to be careful because, of course, our aim is to turn that clock back.
So we want to make sure we're measuring it going that way.
Yeah.
Sybil, can you add any insight into this idea of the convergence between the biotech and science field and what we're seeing in the aesthetic field?
Of course, there are many technologies that we can see that are coming up, and I think they're extremely, extremely interesting. But I just also wanted to mention something to the microbiome, and I think that Bernie knows pretty well that we are also working a lot on the microbiome, and we also have a paper. My colleagues have also a paper on the changes microbiome on skin with aging.
Actually, a very good paper, I have to say. I usually cite it.
And no, but what I wanted to say, there are definitely exciting developments in for biotech. What I think is particularly interesting, if we talk, of course, yeah, we want to target causes of aging. On the other hand, it has to be done very early in time, right? I mean, there are consequences, and we also have to deal with them. And one thing is what is, well, in cosmetics, what we cannot really deal with very well are changes in the extracellular matrix. And I think there, the developments that you can reverse advanced glycation end products, for example, I think that is really exciting. That you might have a way to repair the extracellular matrix. And then other things like partial reprogramming, and I mean, there's a company and they're doing it with microRNAs by expressing the different factors. So I think that is really exciting. And they're also working on skin, by the way. And then, yeah, so I think there are things that are probably not very cosmetic, I have to say, but I think they will change. They will change the way how we can target also skin aging, not just other aspects of aging. And yeah, I'm sure it will influence the landscape enormously.
Yeah.
And especially, for example, I mean, of course, for Allergan, it's more achievable goal, basically, to have this type of advanced treatments. In cosmetic, I mean, there's certain limits what we are allowed to do.
Yes. We're going to address some of those limits in just a moment. Before we do, we've just had a question come in that I think we should address now rather than move on and come back to. And actually it's for Carolina, and it's asking, what is the bottleneck to measuring skin age non-invasively, and why is a biopsy required?
Say the question again, please.
So why is a biopsy required when we're measuring skin aging?
So basically, because the way that this clock is built, we train the clock by sequencing samples of skins, and those samples are skin biopsies. So we isolate the DNA of derms and epiderms, and then we use machine learning to predict the patterns of methylation that change with aging. So basically, once we have a new sample, we can just run the algorithm, and the algorithm will tell us your biological age. And why a biopsy is required? Because we needed to have a sufficient amount of tissue to isolate the DNA to run the clock. And also, if you only get the upper layers of the skin, there is a huge big chance that we're only gonna get like dead cells, so you don't have enough DNA or a good representation of the health of your tissue. So ideally we would have like derms and epiderms, and there is kind of no way that this is not invasive. So that's why maybe the skin microbiome is something that's already on top of your skin could be a predictor that we could assess, the biological age in a non-invasive way.
And do you have, oh, sorry, please go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'm just one of the things, if it's just to add to that, I think one of the challenges is often when we are trying to translate the cellular molecular impact into what we actually see as clinical meaningfulness. And that's something that's incredibly important, because at the end of the day, we need to be able to actually see a difference that is relatable to the individual and also to the physicians who are, providing that treatment. And so therefore, to Carolina's point, not only is the complexity with able to be, chart and see the efficacy as it relates to the different impacts and the different parameters and levels of skin aging, but it's also, we need to be able to correlate it to certain parameters parameters as it relates to visible changes, and also something that correlates to the patient-reported outcomes, for example. And I think that this is where technology and, for example, machine learning and AI is going to play an incredibly important part, because it will also reduce the degree of human error that we do see with some of the subjective measures that we're using currently in the aesthetics industry. But I think also it will help us to eliminate some of the noise that we're seeing, and also be able to look at bigger data sets when we're trying to understand all the different levels and the different aspects of the aging process.
Great, thanks, Stephanie. And just quickly, another question that's come in, and that's about, can you point to the best preclinical model of skin aging? Is anyone keen to take that?
Yes, I mean, that's what we do every day. I think we have a huge advantage of working with skin, because we can grow skins in the lab. So the best preclinical models would be or 3D skin equivalents that we can grow and really mimics human skin. So at OneSkin, we can grow from very young neonatal skin to mid-age and older ages. So we can really recapitulate how the aging process works. And for the final preclinical model, we use a skin biopsies. Then it's a real human skin, and then we can apply products. We can study the DNA, the gene expression. We can study everything, and it's basically the model that will receive the product in the future. So we have this huge advantage of working skin, because we have access to the skin tissues, and we can replicate it fairly easily in the lab.
So I think the answer there is call OneSkin.
Yeah, I can probably expand on that.
Yeah, L'Oreal. Go ahead, Isabel.
Yeah, we have one subsidiary just called Episkin, and they're producing reconstructed skin model, living skin equivalents since many years, and it's at industrial scale, so you can buy them, you can order them, and they are delivered worldwide. And with respect to a predictive model for skin aging, it is a challenge. Let's put it like that. But what we are working on are actually genetically modified skin models. I mean, you can generate stable from, it's all from primary cells, right? Surgical waste, but you can generate stable cells, so the cell lines. Mm-hmm. That, for example, they have they're genetically modified in certain genes that we think are impact aging, and this could be aging models to test compounds. Great. These type of models, and then of course skin explants.
Okay.
That you can keep living for several days in culture. So. But it's not a simple question. I mean, if you have cells, usually if you have a standardized model and these are donors, they're in their 20s, they work already perfectly well, and so then the window that you see something on top is, of course, it's difficult. But then also, for example, there are some aspects of skin aging. It's not just wrinkles that you cannot mimic in a reconstructed skin model, by the way, but also to generate pigmented models. And so you can also look at the changes in pigmentation that occur with aging. And there are also, these are also things I think many people are bothered with. That was already mentioned by Stephanie. These are why people would go and look for more advanced, like aesthetic treatments. Because it's and so these things can be more easily mimicked in reconstructed skin models.
I think we could run a whole session just on this one topic of models, couldn't we? I'm going to touch quickly on our final bullet for discussion, and that's talking about, or looking at the fact that we are, at the end of the day, we're really talking about consumer products here, and we're trying to marry quite a complex science into a space that hasn't traditionally run complex clinical trials or had to really communicate complex science. So I'd like the panel to comment a little bit on how we start to marry these two industries and how you see things going forward. I'm actually going to ask Bernie to start on this one, because you have had, you've got a bit of precedent here with obviously the microbiome space. Can you give some advice from what you've seen as that space has evolved and how you see it, maybe some of the learnings that can be translated over into our biology of aging?
Yeah, I think there's actually an unexpected development in my eyes based on Corona. So the first thing is people got smarter and smarter all the time over the internet. They inform themselves, they connect themselves. The times where everyone, I mean, we still see all these bullshit marketing claims still around, but usually people debunk them quickly. Yeah? And it goes around. And then there's this other development where, like my friends are non-scientists, but since Corona is, everyone speaks about peer-reviewed journals and the latest things and and our values and everything. So they have so much evolved, in the old times I would say something like this and everyone got, what's that? And now they look for these sources. They might not understand everything, but they know where to find it. They know how to rate it. So I think it is coming a time where expensive and hard science, because like really deep science is expensive, and I think everyone on this panel knows it, will pay off, because the consumer will start understanding this and will be able to distinguish this. And then we will need still a bit of education, but it's really the citizen scientists where people start becoming smarter because of the internet, because they can teach themselves faster things, will take off more, and this will how it will change. But it's a prediction, we will see.
Carolina, can you give some insight on your journey and how you see things evolving in this space?
Sure. Yeah, and I couldn't agree more with Penny. It's good to see that everyone is more interested and open to learn about science, because of COVID, and the consumer of today, it's much more like demanding and educated, but we needed to do a huge work on education as well. So in our website, for example, we have a glossary where we define terms that are not common to everyone. We define fasting, we define cellular senescence and hallmarks of aging and what is aging. And we share this in our blogs. What is a peptide? And people reply to us like they love the content. They got to get informative content. And we also love providing more than a product. We love providing this education, this content that is not even about skin, it's about your health in general. So I agree with Benny that I believe that R&D is the long-term marketing, because the more you can share what you are doing, the data, and educate your consumers, more you are going to get more loyal consumers, and they are going to stick with you because they trust you, they trust your products. And yeah, it creates that I would say the longevity like relationship with your customer.
But then let's come to our representatives from larger organizations, and I imagine that the challenge is slightly different when you're speaking from a L'Oreal or an Allergan AbbVie. Stephanie, are you happy to take this one first?
Absolutely, yes, I'm coming from a highly regulated industry, quite rightly so. So we cover skincare, the pharmaceutical side, the device side as well. So we are pretty much looking at it from all the different angles, and have very clear guidance and regulations and restrictions as to what we can be communicating to consumers and also to our customers, and they would be the healthcare practitioners. I think I completely agree, and this is with what Bernie and Carolina have said around the fact that there's definitely a consumer appetite, let's say, for understanding what are the ingredients, what are the active ingredients, and wanting to know more about the products that they are wanting to purchase. And I think that helps create a pressure to be able to bring new innovation, but also really to bring evidence in the science to back up the claims. But what I would say is that there is now such a wide range of skincare products that often their uses have become so expensive and complex that even physicians as well as the consumers often don't quite know where to position them, and are trying to plan and work out exactly where they are best placed and the indications and effectiveness. And so therefore, I think from my perspective, and some advice is to ensure that we are, as an industry, making sure that we are communicating in the right level, and therefore we're also being clear as to quantifying the effects, because often the measurements are different and there's a variation in equipment that's used, there's different formulations and types of administration, which can also have an impact on the delivery to the skin. And often there's some studies that have been done in different body sites. And I think there's definitely a need to make sure that there's clarity as well when we're presenting data, and not misleading people, not bringing out claims that have perhaps been generated on animal models, and that's something that's very important for consumers to be looking at. Is this data that's been generated in humans in clinical trials, having a look at the sample size, so the number of patients who've been studied, and looking for different sources of bias. For example, has the study been placebo controlled or active comparator? Looking at the demographics of the patient's skin type is so important as well, and that's measured by Fitzpatrick skin and phototyping, which is incredibly important, because this is where we need to be making sure that we're looking for products that do represent the whole spectrum of different skin types, rather than just looking at it in the lighter skin typing. And so just to highlight this Fitzpatrick skin phototypes 4, 5, and 6 do represent the darker skin types, in fact more 5 and 6. So that's something that's very important to be thinking about if you are looking at the different products. And yeah, just looking at some of the safety and efficacy measures. So that's a lot of information, but I think it's very important, and it's our responsibility to be very clear as to what we're communicating, and not jumping and making overclaims or translating the animal data too far into humans.
Okay, great, thank you. And Sybil, how do you see this this regulatory framework in particular being tackled from an organization like L'Oreal?
Well, of course, there are limited claims you can make. Of course, you cannot make any, let's say, therapeutic claims. We're working on healthy skin. We have, it's 0 side effects. We cannot target deep tissue. I think, for example, subcutaneous adipose tissue is so important for not only facial aging, but also in other body parts. But of course, we could never make any claim on subcutaneous adipose tissue. So cosmetic, it's highly regulated for sure. And we cannot make any pharmaceutical claims for our products. And also everything is backed up by science, that's for sure. But also, if it's things are tested in clinic, not just not only final products, but also in ingredients, like active ingredients, of course. But nevertheless, I would say that, for example, a company like Lancôme, they may organize scientific symposia to talk about science to consumer, and they invite high-ranking scientists to communicate about a specific scientific concept to consumers. So there is no problem that consumers don't accept science or don't understand science. So of course the communication has to be adapted. It has to be explained in a simple way. But yeah, I don't see any problem that you can, of course, if it's backed up. We have basically, it's based on publications we have for specific particular concepts and so on, but it's not a problem. And I think it, as it was mentioned, since COVID, now people are like, oh, they can develop in 1 year a vaccine. So now everybody is excited, and people were waiting for that. Now people, they understand the sense of science, right? And before well, people
Yeah,
think about it. I mean, but now it's clear without science, you could not maybe find a way out of this crisis. And so yeah, I think it will even though many of our brands, they're communicating really scientific facts for the products and since years. But I think now it will even be more accepted to explain science, and people are more curious about the science behind.
It sounds like it's all about being clear and honest and truthful and trusting your
Yes, yeah, of course. Yeah.
Is there a challenge in this space in that a lot of the work from the biology of aging, obviously we know from mouse models or animal models, and that's obviously something that the cosmetics industry has increasingly tried to step back from?
It's not increasingly trying to step back. I mean, there is a legislation, right?
Yeah.
I think it's a challenge for safety rather than for efficacy.
Right.
But even for safety, I mean, there was a massive development of alternative models, and there are still some issues that are difficult to address in let's say cell-based models. Mm-hmm. But there's a lot of development in silico prediction models and alternative methods. But it's clear that I could not engage any project on a mouse model. I mean, it's for scientific purposes. I could not. Mm. So we only work in human cells and in clinic in human.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Well, we're coming to the end of our time. I feel like I could go another hour with you all. So thank you so much for your time, and thank you all for watching. I'm very sorry for those of you whose questions we haven't quite managed to get to. I would certainly encourage you to reach out to us directly with any questions for any follow-up. As I mentioned at the start of this call as well, this webinar has been recorded and it's part of our HealthSpan show. So that's an event that's running in May virtually. It's free to attend. If you would like to sign up to hear more about the sorts of things we're talking about today, but a whole wide range covering things like nutrition, mental health, lifestyle interventions, I would urge you to join us there. Our panelists will be back that week. You'll all have another chance to rewatch this panel if you would like to, and a whole lot more. So we'd love to see you all there. But look, thank you all again for watching and for engaging with us. It's been really wonderful. And thank you to our panelists. What a really great discussion. It's been such a privilege to talk with you all and to listen to you all. So thank you once again.